Thanks everyone for joining us. Welcome to the High-Tech Salesforce and the Pandemic, presented by the University of Houston Sales Excellence Institute at the Bauer College of Business. We really appreciate your joining us today, particularly those of you, about a third of you that are in the Eastern Hemisphere. I know it's a late work day for you and we appreciate it. And even for those on the West Coast and the Western Hemisphere that are starting their day a little bit early. This is the fifth webinar in our Client Summer 2020 webinars on the impact of the pandemic on sales organizations. This one is highlighting the technology industry, the high-tech industry, which I came out of. And so what I'd like to do is take just a minute and introduce some of our attendees. Shahan Prashad is with Confluent. He's the Vice President of Operations at Confluent. And he's gonna bring a unique perspective to our webinar today. Although I met Shahan when he ran the inside sales organization at Salesforce.com, he is now in a more of a technology buyer perspective, and he'll bring that perspective to our panel today. Eric Charles is the Vice President and Technology Evangelist for Exactly, and Eric is going to be talking about the impact on his organization of his sales organization on the pandemic. And then Dr. Michael Ahern, who is the Cullen Chair in Marketing, holds the Cullen Chair in Marketing at the Bauer College of Business. Mike was just recently named in January as the #1 academic in the world in sales and sales education and academic sales expertise. He's published over 40 articles in Tier 1 journals. Mike is well known in the technology industry and many industries in being a industry leader in where sales is going, and he's going to be leading our discussion today. And finally, Dr. Raga Sharma from IBS in India. I'm going to let Raga introduce himself and talk a little bit about his organization. Raga?
Hi, Carl. Do you want me to introduce my organization? Okay. So a very good morning, American time, Central American time, and good evening to all the esteemed panelists and participants to this wonderful webinar organized by Professor Carl and Professor Dr. Mike. Thank you so much for inviting me and letting me have this opportunity to share my views on this. I would like to share my views on the COVID-19 pandemic and the business, how the economic, in fact, if you see, not only economic, but all the social activities along with the economic activities has been greatly disrupted by this virus. I would like to tell about how this virus probably, or impact of virus probably on the business and how it can be managed. It is not possible in the current pandemic time to survive economic activity in absence of a new business model. This is the need of the time. We, all business enterprises need to find out a new business model, at least till the pandemic continues, and business model which is based on the safety assurance. I would like to share my views on concept called USP, unique selling proposition. As of now, every organization is speaking about unique selling proposition to sell their product and services. But in the current time, if you see, it is not possible if the element of safety is missing in the unique selling proposition. Now the USP need to be changed to a new concept and include a new S to this concept called USSP, unique selling with safety proposition. At least this safety proposition should be included with your unique selling features along with the products and services till this pandemic is over. And the reason is very clear. Now people probably might not be dissatisfied or might not be probably changing products from your organization to maybe any other organization, but they are concerned with the safety. This safety, or to discuss this safety proposition in terms of today's business scenario, I have taken a reverse engineering approach. I will not get into much of the detail, but in this context, I would like to throw some light on how the products are delivered to the end users. Logistics becomes a very important and natural phenomena for that. Uh, I'll not get into the detail of the distribution channels, but I certainly would like to throw some light on the, of course, warehouse, and of course, the plants where these products are manufactured for the consumers. And of course, the employees and the people. We cannot avoid the employees and the people element, because in absence of them, none of the business can survive. So how this safety proposition can be included in the unique selling in terms of probably with the dimension of the logistics. We can use the logistics probably assuring that some kind of antimicrobial or maybe disinfectant systems to be devised to ensure that uh, the logistic chain is safe and it is capable of delivering the safe product to the consumers. Now I would like to discuss a couple of things about the production plants layout. You see, this COVID-19 virus probably, as it has been reported by the specialists, that it can survive on the different kind of surfaces, maybe plastic, maybe metal, or maybe anything. So production plant layout also need to adopt the systems or precautionary measure which has been suggested by the experts, like social distancing. But social distancing as a phenomena is possible to be practiced in organized sector. However, in a country like India, where around 90 to 93% workforce is engaged in the unorganized sector, it becomes a huge challenge for the organization how they can maintain the social distance, because not every organization has the equal amount of resources. So how the organizations which are poor on the resource front probably, how they can manage the social distancing and many other precautionary measures. Another thing probably I think that it is important for every organization to find out is a pandemic safety measure adoption and implementation scheme. Look, if the performance-based incentives can be provided, at least for this COVID-19 till this virus is active, we can find out certain incentive plans based on the adoption of the safety measures by the employees. And of course, we can use these safety measures not only adoption but by the willing implementation of the same thing, uh, and we can use that into our USSP, how our employees and people engaged in the production, they are taking the precautionary measures so that the safe products are delivered to the end users. One more thing I would like to say, safety advantage probably is important along with the competitive and strategic advantage. If you see, a couple of years back, probably in a country like India, where the CSR expenses were not compulsory, but not a matter of legal compliance, at that time, the CSR were probably a competitive advantage, a kind of competitive advantage to the organization, because the buyers of a product of any XYZ company, they believe that their expenses or part of their expenses is going to be used maybe for charitable or social cause. On the same line, if the CSR can be the competitive and strategic advantage for an organization, safety advantage in the present time can also be used as a strategic and competitive advantage. These were the things I would
Thank
like
you,
to
Raga.
discuss. Thank you so much, Professor Lal. Thank you.
Thank you, Raga. Let me one other bit of housekeeping I should have said at the beginning is we will have time for questions from attendees at the end. If you'll put them in chat, Jaron Cooper, our program manager, is going to be monitoring chat, and we will get to as many of your questions as we can. And we look forward. Please feel free to answer those questions. Ask those questions, and if we don't get to them in this hour, Jaron and I will be responding to your questions as best we can after the session. Okay, so let me turn it over to Mike to talk about sales forces and the impact of COVID. Mike?
Great, thank you, Carl. I'd like to start out by profiling a little bit of data that we've been working on in a partnership between the University of Houston Sales Excellence Institute and Exactly. As many people know, Exactly manages a large amount of data across industries. And we have the opportunity to be able to analyze how sales forces in particular are responding to COVID with regard to things like the structure of the sales force and the incentive compensation systems that they're using. to manage the sales organizations. So we looked at, we have data of millions of salespeople, over 1 million salespeople, over 1,200 corporations. And we particularly looked at data in the first 3 quarters, contrasting 2019 to 2020, to be able to look at some of the shifts that are occurring out there and give you a few trends, particularly in the IT or technology space. So Carl, next, please. So one of the things that you'll see is there's and the bar down below indicates the time period where COVID, approximate period where COVID impacts the market. What you'll see is this is a contrast in field versus inside sales organizations. So, so one of the things that we should be looking at here is the impact of field organizations. So you guys, if we could mute the lines. Great. So if the impact of the sales organization, so what we see here is we see an inside organization above in the orange and the field organization in the blue. And what we've seen is that, in fact, what's happened is the inside organization and field organizations have been cut significantly following, and the resources have been cut. But one of the things that we see is the fastest part of the bounce back that's occurred as far as sizing and staffing with regard to the sales organizations has been on the inside function. And this is permanent staffing towards the inside function. So the companies are responding by coming back with a focus on inside sales and not on outside. And that is not because outside can't actually visit. It's just the actual physical feature of having outside sales in place. Go to the next slide. So one of the other things we did is we took roles and we combined them into hunting roles and farming roles, where the primary responsibility is hunting and farming. And we looked at how that's impacted organizations in the technology sector. And one of the things that we quickly found, which I think was very interesting, is to be able to see that that in the blue line, which is the hunters, the hunting function has been cut substantially. Now, this is particularly interesting because data in past years where we have financial crises have shown that hunting actually can be quite beneficial for some organizations during financial crises. I'm going to get into that a little more. So it sometimes determines differences in winners and losers during those time periods. But there's been a fairly stable focus on the farming element of the role. Next. So the other thing that we noticed from some of the data, which was particularly interesting, is quotas have shifted. So the way the composition of the quota itself, there has been more focus and immediate attention, or more focus on retaining existing customers over gaining new customers. So the rewards for obtaining customers have almost tripled as a function of the way quota is set. So most IT companies are focusing now more heavily on retention as a primary strategy. Next. This brings me to a little bit of this idea, noting that some of these trends that are happening, wanted to ask the question, and we wanted to look at research historically that has sort of looked at how do companies respond best during financial crises or crises and recover most effectively. So we've done several research papers where we've studied recovery in crises, and to anticipate what some of the elements will be that are differences that organizations can make to be able to recover from a crisis with regard to their sales force. See, what we see here is that the COVID disruption would be the expectation on the dotted line here. And we could look across multiple companies, and we expect an initial drop and then a recovery time period where some companies go way below what their past performance was. Some will return to approximately where they were before, and others will come out winners. So what we wanted to study is in past crises like the 2009 financial crisis, or past crises prior to that, who were some of the winners and losers that came out of the crisis with regard to gaining new customers, gaining position, versus those losers in the same industries. So let's go next slide, Carl. One of the first things that we know, and there's been a tremendous amount of research on this. In fact, there's been 3 research studies that have examined this in particular, is the idea that organizations that do their best to retain top sales talent during crises are the ones that come out as winners. So those who quickly lay off or downsize their sales organizations or reduce SG&A spend during a financial or a crisis like this come out losers in general. So retaining or being the last element that you cut, which is your sales force, ends up having rewards for you. In particular, holding on to your star sales performers. So if we go to the next slide, Carl. So one of the key things that we know, and this is interesting because this gets to a little bit opposite of what some of the trends and strategy we've been seeing. So one of the things we know is during a crisis, the firms that come out best after a crisis are often those who take targeted acquisition of key potential, high potential business away from competitors. Because when is the time when potential business is at play? It's during times of instability or turbulence. So what happens is the best organizations allocate their resources towards key acquisitions during that period, putting effort to be able to resolve problems for customers that during that period are facing those challenges, to be able to acquire or obtain business from those key customers that they've never been able to penetrate before. So what is the strategy of top organizations? One, it's to focus your retention on the most important customer base. So to focus in on who are your most important customers, retain those important customers, and then look at new targeted business among those most valuable and profitable customers that you can look to obtain. And during this period, allocate resources, in particular sales and product resources, to be able to help you obtain business from those key competitors. I'll give you an example. In the restaurant and hospitality industry, this happens all the time. So restaurants are in a tremendous amount of turbulence, or hospitals in the sanitation area. So companies that are doing supplies on this are limited in the supplies that can be distributed to these areas. So what happens is key suppliers are shut down or not able to supply. So that's an opportunity for a person to strategically allocate resources towards key customers that they'd like to acquire, provide those services necessary, and then retain those businesses after that period, or even provide services that were under disruption during that time period, technical services, anything of that nature. So this is a key strategic advantage. Next. One of the other things that we see as a real important strategy, and this I could spend a lot of time on, but I'm going to be very short on this, is that one of the things is we have to compress the period of planning for our sales organization. So many companies plan on an annual basis or a quarterly basis. What we need to be focusing on is a weekly basis or even a monthly basis. So we need to be able to what I like to do is think about an approach that we might call with our sales force called win the week. And that is, what are we going to do this particular week to be able to win that week? What are the strategies that we will implement regarding customers this week that will bring us to the next level and allow us to achieve growth or retain those best targets? So planning gets compressed to a much shorter period, and we use strategic mechanisms to be able to target and benefit ourselves within that period. Next. Another area that we have to do during this type of crisis is what we call cross-functional coordination. So this is when the sales organization works very closely with the service or operations element of the business. Oftentimes, outside sales can actually visit the customer and see what's happening out there. During the crisis, they have no opportunity to really understand operational issues to the extent that they would normally do so. So they rely on other critical functions to be able to communicate how those operational issues are working. So this coordination between areas, operations, finance, sales, and communication between them is even more critical during this period. And that's where a lot of key customer losses take place by not coordinating these elements. Next. Finally, one of the things that I would like to bring up is organizations, now that their sales force are parked, that take advantage of this as a training opportunity, particularly a learning and training development opportunity, come out winners. So this might be a time that organizations say, oh, we're going to cut down on budgets to be able to train or to develop our people. Actually, what we find is during these periods, if you enhance the spend on development, enhance the spend on training and development of your people when they have this part-time, these are opportunities to be able to enhance the organization as a whole and make them better. This could be focal training on new product sales or developing new product strategies. It could be on product launch training. It could be on customer retention training. Any of these areas that we see as value areas, these are strategic training mechanisms that could be utilized. Next. So what I'm suggesting is 3 kind of core strategies to be able to bring yourself out a winner. The who strategy, this is the win the week strategy, enabling excellence with regard to your engagement with your customer and targeting those particular customers that we're going to engage with. The what, using value tools, in particular, coming up with value and strategy about acquisition, margin, share. Where are we going to use tools to be able to understand how to be able to deliver that quality service to those, or that quality product? And then the last is the training element, which is the how. We want to be able to engage and make people better during this period. So resources on the what, on the who, the strategic compression, and on the how, enhance the capability. So those are a few ideas I have that I wanted to share, and hopefully we can continue on these during our discussion. But I'll pass it back to Carl.
Thanks, Mike. So really interesting. The win the week concept is really something worth further exploring. We'll talk about that more in the general session, but that certainly is a different planning horizon than what many organizations are used to. Let me turn it over to Eric to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID on his corporation exactly.
I think he might be muted.
Eric, I think you're muted.
There we go. I was trying to make sure I didn't make too much noise earlier. So we're a global corporation focused on sales performance management software. So we sell software to companies to manage their sales teams. And that, is a great field, except of course, say, as Mike was showing in his prior slides, when all of a sudden there's a lot fewer sales reps out there as companies were cutting their teams during the crisis. This impacts the quota for some of the sales reps, especially if you had anybody that was focused on a vertical market, like the travel and hospitality is hurting right now. So if your target market are those restaurants that Mike was mentioning were challenged, or are the hotel industry that currently isn't booking rooms, but you had a rep who had a heavy quota on that, you've got to start adjusting the quota. You have, and I am describing things that are going on. I'm avoiding a couple specifics, I'll admit. But that has had a significant impact in that the buyers are pushing things. I'm seeing pipelines still developed, so opportunities are being created, and I track that in our salesforce.com. But at the same point, I'm seeing close dates getting pushed out in many cases as the customers are responding with a, hey, I really like this, but I don't want to do it right now until I know what's happening. Of course, that puts pressure on a sales rep. I always say you have to put on your sales shoes. And if you're a sales rep and a customer says, I need to push this, but you have a quarterly quota and everything's getting pushed to the back half of the year, what's the first, tool you bring out? You drop the price. And all of a sudden you're seeing price pressures if you wanted to close it now, or do you hold on to the value of your product, but accept a later close date? And that's a challenge that I'll admit that we face and that I see our customers facing. The next one is going at the same point. We've got this issue on account development roles, these business development reps, sales development reps, account development reps. These are people that are paid to book meetings for sales reps. So in the past, they all sat in a bullpen at our office, in our Denver office for the most part, picking up the phone saying, "Hi, this is Eric Charles from Exactly. Carl, I was wondering if I could schedule 15 minutes of time with our top sales rep, Jaron." Well, nobody has a desk phone right now. People have gone home. They're working remotely. Now, they might have a voice over IP system, but the phones aren't working. So maybe they have a cell phone. Well, my cell phone, if I pick up my cell phone, it tells me who's calling. And honestly, if your phone number isn't in my directory already, somehow in a communication, I don't pick it up. It goes to voicemail. So that's kicking in. People are complaining about Zoom fatigue. They're spending too much time on screens, not enough time. And then email filtering is getting better and better. So we always, one of the challenges, and I love the fact that Mike talked about the hunter sales reps and the farmer sales reps and the new hybrid role, which I've heard called a rancher, just to, keep the analogies going. But that's becoming an issue. But let's not forget the people who get paid to book meetings and how much harder it is to book meetings right now. People have more time, but it's harder to get a hold of them. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is why I wanted to start there with the goals are shifting. Mike already covered this, where the types of sales roles are shifting, where field sales, I would say, are also have become inside sales. You might have been a field sales rep in the past, but the truth is you're not going out to visit customers. Your skill set is having to shift, and you are having to change your entire style of work. For me personally, I will say, as somebody who carries a foot with our sales organization, I actually attend sales calls. It's now been 149 days since I got on an airplane. And yes, I track this. And that's 149 days where I have not had a personal interaction with one of our customers or one of our prospects. And by personal, I mean there is a difference between looking at somebody over the screen versus walking into a meeting with them. And that is happening to me. And the same thing, this balance is happening. Mike already talked about this, you're hiring for inside sales and people with the inside sales skill set and not necessarily backfilling those field sales positions as they go empty, because hiring is going on. I mean, there are companies that are taking advantage of this pandemic and they're going into other firms and they're poaching top talent. So top talent is at risk right now because other people are realizing, oh, so your numbers are down a little bit. I'll take one of your reps, put them on a 6-month ramp up period. If you're a top rep and someone comes along and says, I'll give you a draw payment against your commissions for the next 6 months because you're getting trained at a new company, you as an intelligent sales rep might decide, why not make the shift, hope a vaccine comes out in the next 6 months and sales opens up again instead of constantly missing my numbers at my current employer. This balance of power, this challenge of keeping top sales reps is real, and it goes beyond just don't let them quit, but realize that competition's going to poach or peer companies that look for the same types of skills. And let's go and go to the next slide. I'm trying to stay within the Professor Herman's 5-minute window.
You're doing great.
The human factor. In the past, I would walk into the meeting. If I go to that third bullet point, the backing up the bus. I mean, that's an old term where it's a big, important enterprise strength prospect, and you're going to bring a whole bunch of folks in sharp suits and sport coats and ties. Not that I've tried to wear a tie in technology, but every now and then I have to remind myself how to tie one. And you really wow the customer at your dedication because all of you are willing to fly in. Well, we can't do that anymore. So we're instead going to do a Zoom sales call, and there's going to be 10 from your side, 10 from the company side pitching. Suddenly I've got 20 little Zoom pictures, and if you don't have Zoom set the right way, they're scaling on the other page. It's bouncing back and forth, and I'm having to change the skill set. So think of that personal skill set that we give to sales reps. How do you read their body language? If I'm looking at somebody and I'm going to pick on him, Mike has turned off his camera for a moment. So all of a sudden, I can't read Mike's body language. Carl, you're keeping almost what I call a poker face. You're very still, but you sometimes smile. Each one of those, Rago, I just got a smile out of him. So I've made a connection, and Shahan is still holding steady. Each one of these are impacting us. So Think if you're a sales rep and for the last 20 years, you've been selling beautifully because you can read people's language. That's why you go to the World Series of Poker and do so well. It's a lot harder to read language over Zoom. And then the final one I want to bring up is the hallway conversation. When I would go to our Denver office, I could hear one of my junior sales reps, an inside sales rep, making a phone call and doing a pitch, and they're in the midst of a sales cycle. And when they hang up, I could walk over, lean against the desk like Lumberg in Office Space and say, hey, let's talk for a second. You're missing the pitch for this product. Apparently, we have failed to teach you the value of this solution. Or why don't you tell me a little bit more about this customer and give them a few ideas. Now, that's not a booked meeting. I overheard. I spent 3 minutes in a hallway conversation with an up-and-coming rep, gave them some guidance and mentoring. That's dead right now. It is very, very difficult to do quick on-the-spot mentoring when people are working remotely. And I do think we're going to see a developmental risk to junior sales team members right now. The similar risk we're going to see to senior sales team members who are used to the personal contact, hey, we covered a lot of stuff this day. I have reservations at Basilique and Newport Beach on Balboa Island for dinner for all of us. Let's all sit down. We're going to have a glass of wine or, a nice espresso. And we're going to continue talking about some of these issues over dinner. If you've built your sales career based on being able to do that, that's gone right now. So there are skills we're missing side that are also going to have to be updated. So a lot of what I've covered, I promise, is stuff we're doing it exactly. I think it gives an overview of some of the challenges that we're still facing. And honestly, I expect to face for the rest of this year. One of my biggest conferences is Salesforce's Dreamforce. Well, they're not holding a live Dreamforce in San Francisco this year. So for the first time in 10 years exactly, I'm not headed to San Francisco in the fall to meet with a couple 100,000 prospects and current customers. How do you replace that part of the sales process? There we go.
Oh, great, Eric. There's an awful lot there. It's interesting to think about this issue of developing your organization. In our sales program, we talk about the number one job of a sales leader is to hire, train, and develop the best people. Well, your issue of developing them is when face-to-face meetings are gone and having it is great. I wonder how effective Mike's win the week strategy can help mitigate some of that. I don't think it can do away with it. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. The other one is you bring up a whole other set of issues associated with the selling process changing, and we'll talk about that later too. Nonverbals are important, and it's easy to hide on Zoom. So, Shahan, well, let me turn it over to you, and you can talk about the buyer perspective a bit on how things have changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Happy to be able to share some thoughts and experiences on this topic. I just wanted to actually echo a lot of what Dr. Mike and Eric were alluding to in their presentations. We've absolutely seen the same things at Confluent. So I think your observations and the research is bang on. So I'd like to just share some realities of where technology buyers, like the realities of their environment right now, and then some recommendations on folks that are selling to those buyers. So first and foremost, your customers are going to be under a lot of pressure right now. So yeah, as you heard Dr. Mike say, a lot of companies right now are in cost-cutting mode. Not all of them, but certainly there's pressure to hit their sales targets. There's pressure to hit their expense targets. Even outside of that, folks are going to have family pressures, like trying to do their job day to day while working from home and managing their families in many cases. So just know that it is an increased, it's a heightened environment of pressure right now that your clients are facing. So that's number one. Next. The second is, given the current economic environment as a result of this pandemic, there is a lot of scrutiny on all vendors and all external and internal spending. So that's not to say that companies are not buying software and are not hiring, but now more than ever, there's increased scrutiny on which are the most strategic vendors, have we negotiated the contracts efficiently, which software systems can maybe, can we eliminate or can we rationalize or can we limit the use to just keep our kind of costs down essentially. So every single vendor now is getting a lot more scrutiny. You'll probably see environments where the CFO now has to approve all purchases above a certain amount, and that certain amount is much lower than what it used to be. And I think most companies have restarted initiatives to just go line by line and look at all of their external spending to see where we could cut and just be as efficient as possible. Number three, next please. Number three is a corollary to the previous one, and that is price matters a lot more than ever in the buying decision. And that's obvious, right? As companies need to focus on bottom line in this environment of potentially decreasing sales, price becomes an ever more important competitive kind of factor when evaluating software solutions. So next. So given these realities, just some suggestions as a buyer. So the first is, your solution must have a rock solid return on investment case. So if your buyer needs to, sell this internally to their CFO, for example, the first thing that's going to be asked is, what's the return on investment? How confident are you that we can achieve the return with this? So in the sales pitches, in the kind of the value, return on investment needs to be very, very clear. Next. The next suggestion is your solution must enable a strategic priority for your client. And what I mean by this is if you need to get software improved as an internal buyer, the easiest way to do it is to say this software is going to help achieve this company goal that we have. That say the CEO had said that we need to achieve these 3 or 4 strategic imperatives for the company this year. Well, if the software that you're buying is directly linked to one of these strategic imperatives, there's a much higher likelihood of being approved. So as you're selling to companies, the importance of keeping it linked to your client's strategic priorities are critical. Next. So Eric touched on this as well. We're now in a reality where software is going to have to be deployed remotely, and any implementation services the same way. So if you're selling a product that typically requires professional services or partners to come in and run consulting engagements to ensure a successful implementation, just know that those are going to have to happen online right now through Zoom, through other means, through customers doing it themselves rather than on-site implementations, which can be a big deal, particularly on large enterprise software deals where kind of the onboarding and the success of that initial deployment is important. So just think about how the deployment aspect is going to go and how the customer is going to be successful out of the gate. Next. I think finally, this one's obvious, but it's even, I think it's even more important right now is to sell with empathy. So just linking back to the original reality that your clients are going to be under increased pressure. So just be empathetic to that. Just understand that they're going to have personal stresses right now, that their companies themselves are going to be under unique environments, and not to be either tone deaf or just kind of naive to that. And as you're marketing to them, as you're selling to them, just be empathetic. Ask them how they're doing, how they're managing, what's important to them. And I think that'll go a long way to forming some of the relationships that otherwise wouldn't have been able to be formed now that it's strictly a remote engagement. Right. And that's it.
Thank you, Shahan. So really interesting perspective. And it's striking to me how that there really were some themes that ran through here. Your conversation about matching strategic priorities is exactly Mike's second pillar about an effective value proposition and tools. to support those. And so what we're going to do now, and by the way, these are pictures of the people that you've been listening to, everyone. And we're going to move to a bit of a panel discussion now that I'm going to try and lead, given all the content that we now have to work with. So let me ask make a couple of comments. First of all, I've anecdotally talked to a couple of our customers who are finding an interesting dichotomy in the market, and Eric alluded to it quite a bit, as did Mike, and that is that people that you don't know are really hard to get a hold of now. So BDRs, SDRs, ADRs that are trying to start from scratch and build relationships, it's really hard. The reciprocal, though, is that I had one senior VP of sales for a large consulting organization tell me that their best relationships have turned out to be extremely receptive to significant conversations during this crisis. So he's had access to C-suite people in organizations where they have done a lot of business that have allowed them to move that process forward quite a bit. So Eric, perhaps you could talk a little bit about that dichotomy a little bit more.
So it's been interesting. Doubled down, arguably, and one of the things we've seen is, as much as I say of Zoom fatigue, one of the things we've seen in the market is people are actually trying to educate themselves more. So I'm spending more of my time on, documents and write-ups and some survey data and partnerships to simply educate the marketplace on, and actually some of it's on that ROI that Shahan was mentioning as well. It's like, here's one thing you can be doing, here's how it might help. And some of this is also going to our existing customers, which fits some of Mike's research as well, like that desperate need. Make sure you're still selling to your existing clients, especially for those of us in the SaaS, the subscription business. But I think it works for everybody. But this is where marketing, and it's almost too bad that we didn't add a section today's discussion to talk about the changing role of marketing right now. I've long felt that marketing too often is fully separated from the sales organization, even though now, if you look at modern, companies, marketing now has their own measures. I mean, digital technology allows us to say, how many people came to the website? I was just looking at this from Exactly's perspective. I just did a quarterly review. Here's how much web traffic we had. Here's how many new people subscribed to the blog. Here's how many people filled out an additional form to become an opportunity. And here's how many of those have then turned into pipeline. Not one of those, the first three of those are all 100% marketing metrics. And you can now measure at least a digital marketing team the same way you measure a BDR, ADR, and eventually in taking it all the way to revenue, obviously at the rep side. And that's happening more and more. There's a lot more pressure on having smarter marketing, which is really smarter content coming out, so that because if you can't find them, you've got to make it even easier for them to find you and get a hold of things and find you in those directions. So that's become a big one. And then, with our BDRs, social selling has become more important. The ability of sitting down, and I know for a fact that at least two of my members of my team are listening to this webinar, and they're going to be sharing stuff out to their network, say on LinkedIn, about things they've learned from some of the other speakers, as a way of trying to draw that in and get more people involved in the knowledge base out there. So this is where sales reps, again, who may have used to be just handed a meeting appointment, are now having to do a lot more work in that way as well. And matter of fact, on that ROI one, Shahan, I've got to keep going because I loved it. I agree completely. One of the things that came up, and I had been teaching this for ages, before you ask for 30 minutes of my time, can you at least spend 5 minutes doing some research on me and my company? And how often people don't do that. I have people who call me up. I can live with you don't know how to pronounce exactly, since it leads with an X, and I'll honestly accept the exactly with sounds like a Z, which is how, I've heard people say it, or just the word exact with an LY. Either one is fine. But then I can see that they haven't even looked at my profile, or they don't even know the products we sell as they try and start pitching. Like, come on, call me back next week after you've actually just gone through my website for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And now you have the time, so there's no excuse not to do that. So I think there's a whole learning process that is now being expanded upon, because things aren't as easy as they were before.
Yeah, great point. Shahan, maybe you can react to that as a buyer. So how hard is it to get your attention when you don't know the person on the other end of the email, phone call, or LinkedIn Connect request today? And how easy is it if it's someone you know and respect? We talk about people do business with people they know, like, and trust. Has time actually opened up for you for those people that you do have time for?
Yeah, I think most certainly. I think for sure that like getting a recommendation or an introduction from someone in my network will, like, I don't know, 10x or 20x the likelihood that I'll take the call from a cold call or a vendor I haven't heard of, or even a vendor I have heard of, but just never really thought to give them the time of day. So I think absolutely those introductions help. And I completely agree with everything Eric said as well. So I think his comments are bang on.
Great. Mike, any comments area of the difficulty of reaching people if there's no relationship versus the ease if there's a significant relationship? It alludes a little bit to the hunter-farmer of Eric's rancher question.
Well, I let me comment from a more general standpoint down to the micro, but let's first talk about one of the things that I think COVID has done is it's expedited the transformation process of the way buyers have been buying. If you look back 10, 15 years ago, we've seen a slow conversion process of this idea. If we talked about when the internet was introduced some time ago, people talked about this disintermediation process where buyers are actually going on and learning for themselves and making their own decisions without the use of a salesperson. So what we saw is that historically there was this sort of inverted U-shaped figure where in the middle, right in the center, is a typical salesperson where there's a customer. So their salespeople are set up so that customers, they want a little bit of information, they want a little bit of help, but they also can search for information. But what we're seeing now is sort of a polarization of our customer base. On one side, we see a set of customers that want to just do things for themselves. They don't need help, they don't need advice, they want to start buying on their own and taking care of things with very little assistance from the salesperson. On the other side, we have customers that require a tremendous amount of consultative and assistance on that side. And so what we see is that what we had as this U-shape has actually inverted into this inverted U-shaped curve where we have more customers on one end and more on the other. And what we see in those customers, and that's actually changed also the way in which the salesperson is required to engage with that customer. So some customers will prefer to self-educate almost completely until they get to the process of actually making the decision. Where others want a lot of assistance in formulating their ideas, strategies, and things like that early on. So a lot of it depends on typing your customer and determining the type of engagement that they want, because you're not going to impose a strategic engagement on a transactional customer. So what you need to be able to do is adapting your style to the way you work.
Do you find that distinction you just made is company-wide, or is that an individual person you're talking about?
Sometimes there tends to be trends in the type of buying that happens, but it's not necessarily company-wide. But the type of products and services that are buying, Some depend on the complexity of what they're buying, the newness of what they're buying, the extent to which they feel they have internal expertise, things like this. But you really have to formulate an idea of how this customer is buying and transacting you to be able to determine how to engage in this. And just to touch on a quick point that was made, you know, in this type of a period, it's really interesting, this high touch point potential. You know, this idea of inbound was becoming more and more popular, and I think it's been heightened by at this period because people are outbound from a new perspective. So you have to draw them in. And so what you're seeing is there's a heightened interest in these tools that are out there that will facilitate this inbound element and also allow us an understanding of what's going on behind from a sales perspective. Without that, we're unable to really understand where those buyers are in their process. So this is becoming really much more important to us to facilitate effective interactions with our customers. And so those organizations who are doing a good job of managing this behind the scenes digital element from the customer and understanding where they are the winners that are coming out of this type of a cycle. So if you can figure out that a customer is having some challenges or something and is searching for elements of what to do, and then you reach out to them, this is a huge opportunity for a win for you in that situation, or if they reach out to you with a solution during that period. So, you know, this is a big possibility for acquiring new business from that perspective.
I think it goes back to something Eric said, which is the importance of digital marketing and the importance of social selling, because when those people are looking, what they're looking for is content, not selling.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a question just 2 days ago from someone we had trained in some digital selling, and he said, "How do you reach out to someone?" This was a tenured salesperson. How do you reach out to someone in a C-suite using LinkedIn to get them to engage with you? And the point is, you don't do it by trying to sell them something. Mm-hmm. If you try and engage with them with something great about your product, that's going to be very ineffective. If you try and provide content that's of value to them at the point where they're looking for that kind of content and value, you're going to enhance your brand and your personal brand and your corporate brand, and that's a real important distinction. We're running short on time here, but I want to. There's one other topic that I want to cover briefly, let's. I think because Eric, you mentioned it, this concept of growth, win the week. Mike's concept of win the week, along of what we've lost by not being able to have those hallway conversations. I know Shahan built a fabulous organization, Salesforce.com, the inside sales organization. And one of the things that worked really, the daily routine of Blackboard sessions and whiteboard sessions and training. It wasn't 6 or 8 hours of dialing for dollars. It was an environment. And high tech it was pre-COVID so far ahead of other industries in accomplishing that. But now everybody's at home. So what do you do?
I mean, I have seen the successes we have is we are doing daily stand-ups. You know, but we're digitally smaller teams. We're bringing in guests on a regular basis. So, you know, I might do a daily stand-up with my team, but I'll bring in a sales manager who sells to say hello and talk about the challenges they're having so that the folks on my team can talk about how to respond to it. I'll tell you the other one, though, that we start our every meeting with is we do a green, yellow, red, and we ask professional. Because that's the other thing, is that there are a lot of emotional aspects of the pandemic that impact people. and how they're living and what their life is like and everything. It could be roommate, it could be parents, could be anything. And so it's very quick. It's just, how you doing today? Green, yellow, red. It might be, yellow. My car broke down and I can't deal with it because the shop only has limited availability. And this has had an impact on me personally to get groceries in, kind of a thing. And then professionally, might say, hey, I'm green on everything except this one project because I can't get a hold of this person from another team to get something done because I can't stop by their desk and say, hey, this won't take us very long, but I'm trying to do this and I need your support. Can you give me a hand? And I'll tell you, bringing the personal back into more of these things in formal meetings, that's a change. Usually you didn't go to formal meetings and have personal conversations because those, again, took place in the hallway. You bring in the personal now into the professional, the very formal meetings, and it's helping barriers because oftentimes it brings up new issues that people don't understand why something's happening or why they have to do something or why they're being asked or why something's being delayed.
And they also recognize that their problems are other people's problems. There's a lot of similarities there, and it goes back to part of it is Mike's comment about how important it is to keep your best people, to keep your good people.
Critical.
You have to do that. Jahan, any comments on that? Continuing to build a team that essentially likes to be together?
I mean, it's certainly a challenge right now. We have seen that productivity has actually been able to stay pretty strong in an environment like this. The great thing about using a CRM is you can analyze things like activity levels and all of that stuff, but I don't think it's sustainable. So, I think folks are operating on initially adrenaline and excitement. And then now that we're sort of in this acute phase, or the acute phase is done, now folks it's becoming it'll become harder and harder to maintain that culture, that environment. So I think we need to continue to think of ways to ensure that folks are engaged, are collaborative, are being collaborative, are learning, are developing in this environment. And I'm not sure we've totally cracked it yet, but I think it's super important.
Great. Okay, so Mike, you have any comments about the organizational building and the importance of keeping the organization together and ways to do it that we haven't covered?
Well, I just want to touch on a little more on the tactical, sort of the win the week element that we talked about with that regarded, because one of the things that most people have challenges with is if you look across organizations, you've got your cores, your stars, your laggards. The stars many times can figure out how to manage things under crisis, under situations where there are challenges. In fact, it's not always the same stars. It could be other people that are very good under challenge or crisis situations. But the question is how do you take the behaviors that these guys are doing to do such a good job and map it into the rest of your team? And that's why these behavior-based types of incentives like the win the week or behavior-based types of elements can be so helpful. So you map these behaviors that the stars are doing onto your average performer to give them insights on to tactically win the week. Sometimes it's when you're under a period of pressure like this, you're just not sure what you should be doing to be able to do your best job. Activities needed, but what exact activity? So the more tactical you can get and prescriptive in that activity, the more likely somebody is to win during that period. So I think that's very important for us. And it also gives a sense of security to people who are already feeling uncomfortable in this type of a situation too. So that's just a couple thoughts.
Great. So we're at the end of our time. We do have about a few questions from you all that we will answer directly. If you registered with your email address, we will get back with you, and most all of you did. Let me just say we really appreciate the University of Houston Sales Excellence Institute's mission is to be the global hub for sales education and research. We hope you found this educational. I want to thank again Raga and his organization for sponsoring us. Shahan, thank you so much for joining us. Eric, really appreciate your insight and your comments. And Mike, as always, thanks a lot. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. You're on our list. We'll let you know when we have another webinar we think you would find valuable.